Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, a dangerous travel forecast ahead of your New Year's Eve as blinding snow, icy roads, and high winds close in. Blizzard conditions slamming states from Minnesota to New York, just in time for the latest round of holiday travel. A total whiteout, up to 4 feet of snow possible in some areas by Friday. Our Ginger Z is tracking it all, plus the whipping winds, and has what to expect for our New Year's Eve. Flu fears growing as a new CDC report shows that cases are surging nationwide. Health officials now estimating about 7.5 million cases. The 29 states reporting either very high or high levels of flu activity, and how the flu vaccine matches up against the fastest growing variant. An NFL star facing charges of strangulation and assault, but his attorney denies the claims. Now the question about whether the NFL will let Stefon Diggs take the field for the playoffs. The beefed up plan in place with additional screenings, plus the last test for the infamous square crystal ball as the world prepares to ring in the new year.
4, 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year!
And it's the final episode of the final chapter of the Netflix series that broke records and has kept fans on the edge of their seats for nearly a decade. Tonight, a look at the end of Stranger Things.
I need you to fight one last time.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Dimbert, in for Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with the blizzard conditions and brutal cold winds pushing across much of the country for New Year's Eve. Millions of people are under winter storm and high wind warnings from Minnesota to New York to Maine tonight. Those winds gusting up to 65 miles per hour in some areas. Whiteout conditions hitting Buffalo, New York, near zero visibility. And up to 4 feet of snow possible by the end of the week. Drivers facing dangerous road conditions, snow plows struggling to keep up with the snow. Strong winds toppling the canopy at a gas station outside Cleveland. We have Ginger Z standing by with the forecast for New Year's Eve, but first let's get right to ABC's Faith Abube.
Tonight, after pummeling the Midwest with howling winds and feet of snow, blizzard conditions now paralyzing upstate and western New York. In Buffalo, watch as the waves thrash the shoreline and roadway, the water transforming into a lake-effect blizzard. WKBW Buffalo reporter Michael Schwartz braving the dangerous conditions in Hamburg.
You can see those waves that are coming up here on the shores of Lake Erie in Hamburg, and that BMW has been here since 7 a.m.
Hours later, the BMW entombed in ice. Police say it was reported stolen. In Syracuse, snow bands blowing off Lake Ontario brought traffic to a standstill this morning. Power lines whipping around Rochester, crews in Elba, New York, cleaning up downed trees. And in Lackawanna, doorbell camera catching the moment Diane Miller opened the door at her daughter's house and the wind took her.
Are you okay?
I think God took care of me because at my age, my bones break very easily.
New York's governor expanding that state of emergency to include the entire state. Outside Cleveland, this gas station canopy knocked over. In the west, families north of Los Angeles and Wrightwood cleaning muck out of their homes. A new storm set to move in, promising to dump more rain that they don't need. Andrew, the lake effect snow warnings are still in effect. Some areas could get up to 4 feet by Friday. Andrew.
Faith, thank you. Let's get right to Chief Meteorologist Ginger Z. And Ginger, dangerous winds and snow are threatening again tonight?
Yes, Andrew, Syracuse, New York had 19.3 inches of snow, which is not just a daily record, but the most snow in one day in the month of December ever since records began, and the most snow they've had in one day in nearly 34 years. And it's not done. We've got more where that came from. You can see some of the warnings and advisories still on the map. Some of those wind advisories for Boston, for example, goes until about 1 a.m. And then it's going to be the focus on tomorrow evening as everybody's headed out to their parties and getting to where they need to go. You've got along Interstate 80, a system that's going to then be lake enhanced, and then more lake effect snow as we go toward the end of the week. So totals wise, on top of what we've already had, some places could get another foot or two. The Tug Hill Plateau could be in that 2+ category. And a quick look at the New Year's Eve forecast. A big pattern shift back into the wet weather with flood watches already in place for Los Angeles. And then for Times Square, as we watch that ball drop, the temperature will be around freezing, the wind chill in the mid-20s. You might even see a few flakes of snow, some flurries mixing in with that confetti. So not the worst we've ever had, but certainly going to be plenty chilly as we start 2026. Andrew.
Ginger, thank you. A new CDC report shows flu cases are surging nationwide. Health officials estimate about 7.5 million cases. 29 states are now reporting either very high or high levels of flu-like illnesses. Many linked to a new variant, and tonight, what that means for the current flu vaccine. Here's our Rhiannon Alley.
Tonight, a sharp rise in flu cases raising alarm among medical experts. In just 1 week, according to CDC data, flu-related illnesses jumping more than 60% from 4.6 million to 7.5 million. Hospitalizations also spiking more than 60% from 49,000 to 81,000. And more than 1,200 deaths have been reported. 29 states now reporting very high or high rates of illness, including New York, which just reported its most ever cases in a week. Some schools closing early for the holiday break due to widespread illness.
We had about an hour where the phone was just ringing off the wall and parents calling kids in sick.
CDC data showing last year's child flu deaths reached their highest level since the 2009 swine flu pandemic. Experts say vaccination rates among kids, down 10% compared to before the pandemic, are partially to blame. The CDC says the bulk of cases are linked to a new variant called subclade K, which has mutations that appear to have resulted in a mismatch with this year's flu vaccine. Doctors say getting the vaccine will still reduce the risk of severe illness.
Rhiannon joins us now, and Rhiannon, many experts are concerned that this flu activity hasn't even peaked yet.
That's right, Andrew. The CDC releases its data on a delay. That means these latest figures are from the week before Christmas, which means current levels are likely even higher, Andrew.
Rhiannon Alley, thank you. For more on the rising flu numbers and what you can do to keep yourself and your loved ones healthy, our medical correspondent, Dr. Darian Sutton, is here with us. Okay, as we saw, flu numbers are high nationwide, especially here in New York. So what are you seeing in the ER?
Well, here in New York, we've got some of the highest number of cases that we've seen since 2009. Just recently, the reporting ending on December 20th totaled over 70,000 cases or illnesses within 1 week. That was, again, one of the highest numbers that we've seen in over 10 years. And that's reflective of what we're seeing nationally. That 7.5 million, important to note, that's 3 million additional cases compared to the week prior. That 81,000 hospitalizations, that's a 65% increase, and adding 15 states with the title of very high flu-like illness. So what we're seeing in the emergency room is volume. It's not necessarily different person to person, but the amount of people sick is what is causing hospital strain.
And if you are feeling sick, what kind of tests can people get? Is there something they can get over the counter, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually brought one with me. I've been carrying it around all day, showing people exactly what it looks like. So this is a combination flu and COVID test. You can find it at your local pharmacy. I think it's incredibly helpful, and it's most accurate when you're symptomatic. And I like to use these because there are different options, especially for those who are high risk. For example, for the flu, Tamiflu, of course, and for COVID, Paxlovid and Remdesivir for those patients who are admitted to the hospital. We typically reserve those for patients who are high risk. So important to understand if you're over the age of 65, if you are pregnant, for children under the age of 5, and for those who are immune compromised, you would be considered high risk. So if you find that you're symptomatic, you should seek out assistance. Treatment might be available for you.
And if you're just feeling under the weather and, I can battle through this, at what point do you go seek medical attention, whether it's a doctor or even the ER?
Great question. For most, the symptoms can be treated from the comfort of their own couch. But for those who are suffering symptoms that include difficulty breathing, shortness of breath, especially chest pain, important note here, heart attacks are increased in the setting of the flu. Inflammation associated with the flu infection can increase your risk of heart attack and stroke. So you want to make sure to talk to a doctor if you have those symptoms. And then a high or persistent fever, especially for children, you want to talk to a provider to make sure that it's nothing else.
And what does if you're infected, what does it look like if you are vaccinated versus someone who's unvaccinated, all things equal?
You know, that is an important question, because even though the vaccines are available and they reduce our risk, there is still a risk that you can get infected. But important to note, if you are vaccinated, you're more likely to have milder symptoms, a shorter duration of symptoms, and less likely to suffer from the complications. And those who are unvaccinated are more likely to need hospitalization and increased risk of death. So those are the differences with vaccines. They are still affording us protection. For adults, about a 30 to 40% reduced risk, and for children, up to a 75% reduced risk.
So cases are on the rise, and the timing here, New Year's Eve, just right around the corner. You know, people like to pack into whether it's Times Square or some party at home. What can people do to protect themselves when gathering in large crowds like that?
You know, vaccination's obviously a leading thing that we can do to reduce our risk. Making sure that you're masking, especially when you're going in dense communities and when you're traveling around. Making sure that you're washing your hands. And then when you're planning your parties, plan for the person who is highest at risk and adjust the level of mitigation for that person.
All right, Dr. Darian Sutton, always appreciate your expertise and insight. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
All right, turning now to a major escalation with Venezuela. New reports suggest that a CIA drone strike was behind the attack on a port facility there. President Trump sharing few details about the operation. This comes as the U.S. military carried out another deadly strike on an alleged drug boat in the Eastern Pacific. Here's senior White House correspondent Selena Wang.
Tonight, a dramatic escalation in the U.S. pressure campaign against Venezuela involving the country's top spy agency. The CIA reportedly carrying out a drone strike on a dock allegedly used by the gang Tren de Aragua to transport drugs overseas. According to the New York Times and CNN, they reported no one was on the dock or killed during the attack last week. Overnight, the president sharing new details about the operation.
There was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. They load the boats up with drugs. So we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area. It's the implementation area. That's where they implement, and that is no longer around.
In fact, President Trump himself first revealed the strike, the first known U.S. operation inside Venezuela, in a radio interview last week.
They have a big plant or a big facility where they send where the ships come from. 2 nights ago, we knocked that out. So we hit them very hard.
Tonight, the CIA declining to comment on the attack.
The whole idea of using the CIA here means that the president doesn't have to go up to Capitol Hill and ask for the use of military force.
This as U.S. operations against Venezuela enter a new phase. The U.S. has launched at least 30 strikes against alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and Pacific Ocean. Overnight, the military sharing this video of a missile strike on one of those boats in the Eastern Pacific, killing 2, bringing the death toll to 107 people. The U.S. has yet to provide any evidence to prove those killed were smuggling drugs or posed an imminent threat to the United States.
And Selena Wang joins us now. Selena, there's also news tonight on negotiations for a potential peace plan in Ukraine.
Andrew, that's right. In fact, President Zelensky was just here in Mar-a-Lago meeting with President Trump. And tonight, he's telling reporters that he's discussing the possibility of American troops on the ground in Ukraine alongside forces from other countries as part of Ukraine's security guarantees. That is to prevent Russia's Vladimir Putin from invading again. But Andrew, tonight, no word from the White House on President Trump's stance on this. Trump has said previously that there would be no U.S. forces deployed to Ukraine. Andrew?
Selena Wang, thank you. For more now, we're joined by former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East and ABC News contributor Mick Mulroy. Mick, the U.S. has conducted the first known strike on Venezuelan soil after it hit a dock allegedly targeting drugs that were being loaded onto boats. Russia has now also come into play, reassuring Venezuela that it has its support. So big picture, what does this escalation represent, and where do we go from here?
Certainly, Andrew, the president had forecasted both that there was a covert campaign that he had authorized in Venezuela and that there would be land strikes. And so now we see that he intends to use this covert campaign, the CIA likely, to do these type of strikes. And this might just be the tip of the iceberg. There might be many more going on. We found out about this because the president actually referenced it, as you showed in an interview. But there could be several more going on, and this might be escalatory to get President Maduro to stand down. As far as Russia's support to Venezuela, they have been supporting for quite some time. That is of concern to the United States, particularly if there's any kind of operation to apprehend Maduro, just like there was back in the 90s for Noriega. A lot of the weapon systems that Russia provides the Venezuelans are a threat to aircraft, including helicopters that could be used to carry special operation forces. So it is a viable threat, and I'm sure that it's taken notice in the Pentagon and at Langley.
So details as to whom carried this dock strike remain murky, whether it was the CIA or the U.S. military, for example. Does it even matter?
It does, because the CIA has different authorities than the military. The CIA, under Title 50, it is deniable. The president not only didn't need to talk about it, but can actually say it didn't happen. That's obviously not the case now. I don't know exactly who carried this out, but if the military is saying it wasn't them, then by deduction, and the fact that the president had mentioned the covert campaign, it's likely the CIA.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is accusing the U.S. of using him as an excuse to go after Venezuela's natural resources. Could that be the case here, or is the U.S. just after a regime change in Venezuela?
So President Trump has referenced that Venezuela stole U.S. oil. I think he's referring to the fact that U.S. energy companies had a partnership with Venezuela to get their oil out of the ground, essentially, and get it to market. Venezuela nationalized it and kicked those companies out. That doesn't mean it was U.S. Property, and I don't think that would be the case. I don't think the U.S. would obviously go in and take oil based on military force. But I do think it's clear that it's beyond just a drug interdiction operation. We wouldn't need to interdict oil tankers going to Venezuela to essentially cut out the funding for the regime. So this looks more like it is in line with regime change. And the chief of staff actually said that to the effect that she was talking about why this was happening. So this taken together, this major naval blockade, these strikes inside the territory of Venezuela, look like this is really to push Maduro to essentially leave on his own accord. Hopefully it doesn't need any more escalatory action after that.
So you touched on it a bit there. U.S. politicians, mostly Republicans, have argued for regime change in Venezuela. What has been America's luck with that in other countries?
So not great. I mean, certainly we had a regime change in Iraq when we invaded and removed Saddam Hussein, very costly in lives and treasure. I don't think that the American people would like to see an actual invasion of Venezuela. That would be significant, costly, and likely very long term. But if this pressure campaign gets Maduro to voluntarily step down, that might be something different. But this could be a giant bluff, or it could be building to something that I think would be much more substantial, like a direct military and CIA action inside Venezuela to either oust Maduro by force with a coup or direct military action. We certainly are postured to do that. I just don't think that's the ultimate outcome here.
Mick, let's turn now to Iran. The country announced over the weekend it was at war with the U.S., Israel, and Europe. This comes as protests have taken over the country, due mainly to economic issues, especially the plummeting value of the nation's currency. What do you make of Iran's war declaration and the situation in their country right now?
So, Andrew, I think they're seeing a lot of these protests you just referenced, and they're very concerned about the survivability of the regime. The first thing that most of these type of regimes do is try to come up with an enemy outside to get the people to rally around them. So saying they're at war with the United States, Europe, and Israel is obviously not the case, but it seems to me that they're really inclined to try to shift the narration inside Iran to something other than the fact they have completely failed the Iranian people and their economy is in free fall. Another way to repair that would be to enter into a new agreement with the United States on the nuclear agreement. And that would ultimately relieve them of the sanctions, which is one of the biggest factors causing such a dire economic situation in the country.
Mick Mulroy, thank you for your time. New England Patriots star Stefon Diggs is facing 2 charges of strangulation and assault. He's accused of attacking his personal chef over a payment dispute. His attorney is denying the allegations, and tonight, the Patriots are responding. Tonight, New England Patriots wide receiver Stefon Diggs facing multiple criminal charges stemming from an alleged incident at his home earlier this month. According to the police report, a woman who said she was working as a private chef at Diggs' Dedham, Massachusetts home claims he entered her unlocked bedroom December 2nd after they had been having an ongoing text exchange over money owed to her. She says he subsequently smacked her across the face and then tried to choke her and allegedly threw her onto the bed and said something to the effect of "thought so" before walking out of the room. Authorities now pursuing felony strangulation or suffocation and misdemeanor assault and battery charges against Diggs after police say the victim changed her mind and wanted to go ahead with filing criminal charges. In a statement, Diggs' attorney says in part he categorically denies these allegations because they did not occur, and he looks forward to establishing the truth in a court of law. The four-time Pro Bowler recently had a baby boy with rap star Cardi B. Meanwhile, the Patriots saying in part, "We support Stephan and they will cooperate fully with the appropriate authorities and the NFL." The arraignment in the Diggs case is scheduled for January 23rd. And the fallout from renaming the Kennedy Center continues to grow, with several artists, including a jazz group set to perform New Year's Eve, canceling in protest. The Cookers are the latest in a slew of artists who've called off their performances after the president added his name to the building, making it the Trump Kennedy Center. The Trump-appointed president of the center said the center plans to sue drummer Chuck Red for his Christmas Eve cancellation, calling it a political stunt. Here in New York City, about 1 million people are expected to soon pack into Times Square to welcome the new year with the famous ball drop. Law enforcement is on high alert for the event as they prepare to deploy thousands of officers and implement additional screenings in the security zone. Our Rena Roy has a look at the final preparations. Rena?
Andrew, there is no question security will be tight at New Year's Eve celebrations across America tomorrow night, especially here in New York City. The police commissioner is saying the entire New York City Police Department will be on the job, including K-9 teams and undercover cops keeping a close eye on the celebrations. Authorities say we can expect more officers and secondary screenings this year compared to previous celebrations. Times Square considered an aspirational target, according to a threat assessment obtained by ABC News. And in New Orleans, National Guard troops patrolling in the French Quarter after last year's car ramming attack that killed 14 people. And law enforcement officials say there are no credible or specific threats against Times Square or other high-profile celebrations across the country. But as always, they are urging people to stay vigilant. Andrew?
Rena Roy, thank you. Israel says it's suspending 37 humanitarian organizations from working in the Gaza Strip beginning January 1st, claiming they did not meet required security and transparency standards. Maggie Rulli has the latest on this decision from London. Maggie?
Hey, Andrew. Yeah, in total, 37 humanitarian organizations have been suspended, and that includes well-known names like Doctors Without Borders and Oxfam. Now, the suspension means that those groups will be barred from working in Gaza starting on January 1st. In a statement from the Israeli government to ABC News, they say the affected NGOs have, quote, failed to meet required security and transparency standards, adding that there are findings that employees of certain international organizations were involved in terrorist activity, going so far as to call it terrorism disguised as humanitarianism. So, Andrew, now the big question is, what do these new suspensions mean for people in Gaza right now? Well, Israel says it will not affect the level of aid given to people in Gaza, and that only a limited number, less than 15% of aid organizations, failed to meet their standards. But international aid organizations have repeatedly criticized these restrictions put in place on aid by Israel. And, Andrew, right now, tens of thousands of Palestinians are suffering severe living conditions with winter storms and heavy rain that have flooded thousands of tents in camps where displaced Palestinians are living. Andrew?
Maggie, thank you. ABC News did reach out for comment to both Oxfam and Doctors Without Borders. Oxfam has not responded, and Doctors Without Borders said as of today they've received no official decision from Israel, adding that their organization supports around 20% of all hospital beds and supports the delivery of 1 in 3 babies. And we're tracking several other headlines around the world. An avalanche near a ski resort in Spain's Pyrenees killed 3 people and injured another on Monday. The victims were part of a group of cross-country skiers. 2 members of the group were able to escape and call for help. Spain's Civil Guard posted a video of rescue efforts, including sniffing dogs deployed to search for the missing. At least 1 person was killed and at least 30 injured in a train collision today on the Peru rail line that travels to the most famous Inca ruins of Machu Picchu. The fatality is a 61-year-old train technician, and the U.S. Embassy in Peru says Americans are among the injured. A rescue operation at the crash site is underway, and the cause is being investigated. And Denmark's postal service wrote a breakup letter of its own today, announcing the end of letter delivery services after 401 years. According to PostNord, mail volume in Denmark has declined by more than 90% since the year 2000, so they're removing post boxes and shifting to parcel delivery. Danes who wish to mail a letter must now visit a PostNord shop or a drop-off kiosk. We learned today that Tatiana Schlossberg has died. She's a granddaughter of President John F. Kennedy and daughter of Caroline Kennedy. She revealed her leukemia diagnosis in The New Yorker last month, penning an emotional essay about preserving memories for her children and the sadness over bringing more loss to her mother. Here's our Mola Lange.
Tonight, the Kennedy family mourning again. Tatiana Schlossberg, daughter of Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg and granddaughter of President John F. Kennedy, has died after losing her battle to a rare form of leukemia. The 35-year-old environmental journalist, wife, and mother revealing her diagnosis last month in The New Yorker, writing, "For my whole life, I have tried to be good, to be a good student and a good sister and a good daughter, and to protect my mother and never make her upset or angry. Now, I have added a new tragedy to her life, to our family's life, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. It's yet another heartbreak for her family, and especially for her mother, who has endured a lifetime of loss. Caroline's father, President John F. Kennedy, assassinated when Caroline was just 5 years old. 5 years later, her uncle, Robert F. Kennedy, assassinated too. And then Caroline's younger brother, JFK Jr., along with his wife, Caroline Bessette Kennedy, killed in 1999 when the small plane JFK Jr. was piloting crashed in foggy weather off Martha's Vineyard.
Our thanks to Mola. Coming up, what you need to know about the recall of ground beef in 6 states and the crimes and cases that dominated headlines in 2025. We look at stories of justice and injustice over the last year and preview what's in store for 2026. And next, the iconic New Year's Eve ball drop in Times Square began 118 years ago with a 700-pound wood and iron orb. Oh, how that's changed with the times and the surprises in store for this year's descent.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! Yeah, look, a little golden color there. Wow.
The Times Square crystal ball passed its test today, and the stage is set for one of the biggest New Year's celebrations yet. The crossroads of the world is set to welcome millions of people to ring in 2026 tomorrow night. The tradition spans more than a century, and the iconic ball has evolved with the times. Here's a look by the numbers. The first ball dropped on Times Square in 1907, 118 years ago. Weighing in at 700 pounds, the original wood and iron orb had 100 light bulbs. It was built by a young immigrant metalworker whose company would go on to lower the ball for most of the 20th century. In 1940, the original ball was replaced with a 400-pound iron ball. Then in 1955, it was upgraded to a 150-pound aluminum ball with 180 light bulbs. For 7 years in the 1980s, red light bulbs and a green stem transformed the ball into an apple for the I Love New York campaign. In the 1990s, the ball got aluminum skin, rhinestones, strobes, and computer controls. And for the millennium, Waterford Crystal added the ball's now signature crystal triangles. And on its 100th anniversary in 2007, the ball's incandescent light bulbs were replaced with LED lighting, allowing for more brightness and color capabilities. Today, the iconic crystal ball is 12 feet around and weighs 11,875 pounds. After more than a century of marking the passing years and keeping up with the times, the ball has another trick in store this year. It will descend twice. After the familiar midnight lowering of the Constellation Ball, the ball will rise and be dropped a second time, displaying a special design to kick off nationwide celebrations marking the U.S.'s 250th anniversary. But you don't need to wait until tomorrow night to start celebrating. Join us here on ABC News Live all day tomorrow to track New Year's celebrations around the world. Coming up, we're tracking a freight train derailment in Kentucky. The train was transporting molten sulfur, and the new guidance from the post office that could have a major impact on everything from bill payments and prescription refills to ballots. Welcome back to Prime. Here's a look at the stories making headlines right now. Brutally cold winds are pushing from Minnesota to the Northeast for New Year's Eve. Millions are under winter storm and high wind alerts from Michigan to New York to Maine. Winds gusting up to 65 miles per hour in some areas. Whiteout conditions have hit Buffalo with near zero visibility, and 4 feet of snow is possible in some areas by the end of the week. New England Patriots wide receiver Stefon Diggs is facing charges of strangulation and assault in Massachusetts after a complaint was made by a woman who worked as a private chef for the NFL player. The complaint claims that during a December 2nd dispute over money Diggs allegedly owed her, he, quote, smacked her across the face and tried to choke her using the crook of his elbow. Through his attorney, Diggs denies the allegations. A new CDC report shows flu cases surging nationwide. Health officials estimate cases jumped 60% in just a week. 29 states are now reporting high or very high levels of flu activity. The bulk of the cases are linked to the new subclade K variant, which has mutations that appear to have resulted in a mismatch with this year's flu vaccine, but doctors say getting the vaccine will still reduce the risk of severe illness. Authorities in rural southwest Kentucky were monitoring air quality after 31 cars from a freight train derailed this morning. One of the cars that was carrying molten sulfur caught fire. That fire, however, was quickly put out. No injuries were reported, but authorities closed part of U.S. Highway 41 near the city of Trenton as a precaution. Coming up, what happened after a driverless car meandered into an active fire scene in Hollywood. And from Sean Diddy Combs' graphic trial to Cardi B's unforgettable testimony and the still unfolding case of Luigi Mangione, we wrap up the year in law and justice. Welcome back. As we reflect on the biggest moments of 2025, it was an especially busy year in the courtroom. From Sean Diddy Combs to Karen Reed to Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni and Luigi Mangione, 2025 had no shortage of high-profile trials. Prime anchor Linsey Davis has this report, part of Robin Roberts' 2-hour special, The Year 2025, now streaming on Hulu and Disney+.
This year in celebrity trials was wild.
Diddy said, "Hold my beer."
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs at the center of one of the year's most anticipated trials.
Never before has such a cultural force stood trial.
He faces multiple charges, including racketeering and sex trafficking.
The jurors taken aback by graphic images shown to them at the Sean Combs trial.
A lot of the Diddy trial was too much to handle.
That infamous video of Sean Diddy Combs beating Cassie, his girlfriend.
I cannot underscore how many times you heard the word freak off. These elaborate, recorded sexcapades.
If they said baby oil one more time,
that's gonna ring in my ears.
The verdict came down after weeks of testimony.
We begin tonight with breaking news in the Sean Diddy Combs trial.
Convicted on 2 lesser charges, but cleared of the 3 carrying possible life sentences.
Finding him not guilty of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking.
A judge handing down a 4-year sentence for the rap mogul.
In the end, the case ends with a whimper. He was facing decades in prison, and he's convicted of a couple of relatively minor offenses.
It's a great victory for Sean Combs. It's a great victory for the jury system.
But in the court of public opinion, he will be in exile. He's going to be in his own personal prison forever.
We're going to turn now to the latest overnight on the It Ends With Us lawsuits that don't seem to end.
Late last year, actress Blake Lively accused actor-director Justin Baldoni of sexual harassment on the set of their movie, It Ends With Us.
I thought we were friends.
We are friends.
This year, the legal battle continued to build.
And she sued, and Justin Baldoni countersued, and this all became a mess.
Lawsuits, counter lawsuit to the counter lawsuit.
Putting out text messages, putting out emails.
And it has dragged in everybody. It dragged in her husband, Ryan Reynolds.
How's it going?
Great. Why? What have you heard? It dragged in her friend Taylor Swift for a hot second.
We were this close to seeing Taylor Swift in a courtroom talking about her text messages with Blake Lively.
While Baldoni's suit has been dismissed, he can still appeal, and Lively's suit is set to head to trial next year.
If after all this they don't give us a televised trial, see, that's what I would protest.
America wants 2 things. We want our celebrities to be perfect.
But if they're not, that's fine too.
In California, Grammy winner Cardi B found herself in court defending against allegations that she assaulted security guard Imani Ellis. Cardi B was cleared, but her testimony was something to remember.
Every day I was checking for new clips of what Cardi was saying.
Yesterday you had black hair, short hair. Today it's blonde and long. Which one is your real hair?
They're wigs.
Very mundane questions from a legal standpoint.
Do you know how tall Miss Imani Ellis is?
And it was just hilarious to see her navigate the legal system.
She just looks a little like she could protect the building.
Even the guy who was supposed to be defending the other party, he was like, would you call this an altercation? And she's like,
We having, I'll say, a debate.
She was truly, authentically who she is. And it worked because she won.
One of the year's biggest cases, the retrial of defendant Karen Reed.
She's accused of running down her boyfriend in her SUV, a Boston police officer. Her defense team says she's being framed.
She was not just claiming her own innocence. She was pointing to the potential guilt of an entire police department. That's why this case took over Massachusetts the way it did.
And it was just so fascinating to play detective, armchair detective, and cobble the pieces together.
Did Karen Reed run over John effectively with her car?
How did she know where to look exactly when the body was in the snow?
Did she actually murder him and leave him for dead?
It was exciting all the way up until the end.
Defendant not guilty or guilty?
Ultimately, Reed was acquitted of the more serious charges, but she was found guilty of driving under the influence. 2025 brought resolution to another case that gripped the nation.
The other breaking story, the verdict late today in Illinois.
In Illinois, the former sheriff's deputy who fatally shot Sonia Massey in her own home was found guilty of second-degree murder.
It's a tragedy all around. It's a tragedy for that woman and her loved ones.
But it was the trial centering on those brutal student murders in Idaho that was over before it began.
A stunning turn for defendant Bryan Kohberger.
The man accused of the brutal slaying of 4 college students.
The judge made a series of rulings before the trial even began that was going to make it very difficult for Bryan Kohberger to put up any kind of a defense.
Interesting fact, Idaho has recently become one of the only states to allow death by firing squad.
Right before the trial was supposed to begin, Bryan Kohberger accepts a plea deal. And instead of the death penalty, he agrees to accept 4 consecutive life terms.
But what an unsatisfying ending for so many of the victims' families and the community that wanted to know why he did it. And we may never get any kind of a satisfactory answer.
For all the court cases that dominated headlines, there were a few you might have missed.
So what would you do if you were hit in the face by something during a roller coaster ride? This woman who went to SeaWorld said that she was severely injured when a duck hit her at full speed on a roller coaster.
She's now suing SeaWorld, claiming they failed to maintain a reasonably safe condition.
What do you want SeaWorld to do about ducks flying through the air?
I will say, who would think that a duck would fly into your face while you're on a ride and knock you out? She didn't assume that risk.
SeaWorld has asked a judge to dismiss the lawsuit, saying that its investigation concluded the woman was hit by a wild, snowy egret, not a duck. As we look ahead to next year's docket, 2026 already promises to be one to watch.
What do we want? Free Luigi! When do we want it? Now!
Luigi Mangione is facing federal charges, accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, a case that will likely continue to captivate into next year.
He's being held for murder. And in the meantime, though, he's developed this bizarre fan club. They're getting legal donations coming in by the thousands. They gave him a pair of socks. Inside the socks, someone had planted a pair of love notes.
He became really famous to the point that people seem to forget why he became famous.
It's almost like people are going to watch that court the way that they watched Love Island.
Our thanks to Linsey Davis. Robin Roberts' 2-hour special, The Year 2025, takes a look back at the most memorable moments that dominated headlines this year. It's now streaming on Hulu and Disney+. Coming up, a police officer in Ohio had to make a quick decision when a driver was stuck in his burning vehicle, what body-worn cameras captured. And the college basketball controversy that has legendary coaches saying the game they love will never be the same. What changes at the U.S. Postal Service now mean for postmark dates, why a driverless car meandered into an active fire scene, and the homeowner threatening to sue because a bear won't move out of his crawl space. These stories and more in tonight's rundown. Body-worn cameras captured a harrowing scene in Cortland, Ohio, as two police officers approached a burning car with a driver trapped inside. The vehicle had driven through a fence and flipped on its side, forcing one officer to remove the driver through the sunroof, while the other grabbed a fire extinguisher to control the blaze.
My leg's broken.
Okay. Officials said the driver sustained serious injuries, and the Ohio State Highway Patrol is investigating the crash. One California man is sick of his unwanted house guest. A 550-pound black bear has been living underneath his home in a crawl space for more than a month. He even had to turn off his gas after the bear damaged a gas line. The homeowner says the bear sounds like a dragon and scares him, and that he may sue the state's Department of Fish and Wildlife if they don't remove the bear soon. The department told ABC News that the agency has been working to remedy the situation by installing cameras, lights, traps, and bait to coax the creature off the property. The U.S. Postal Service released new guidance effective Christmas Eve that could impact when your mail is postmarked. The new rule explains that the postmark date is not necessarily the date a piece of mail is handed over to the Postal Service, but when it's processed. Because the Postal Service has consolidated processing centers in recent years, it's likely to take longer for mail to get to a facility and therefore be postmarked. The Post Office advised that customers can visit a post office location for a manual postmark for sensitive mail like ballots. A Waymo ride in Hollywood took a wrong turn straight into an active fire scene. The autonomous car drove past road flares and into an area where the Los Angeles Fire Department had blocked off the street. It appears the Waymo vehicle had at least one passenger in the back seat. Witnesses say the car stayed inside the closure for about 10 minutes before it made a U-turn and drove away. A massive ground beef recall is in effect after E. coli was found in nearly 3,000 pounds of beef distributed across 6 states. The recall affects Forward Farms grass-fed ground beef that was sold in 16-ounce vacuum-sealed packages. The USDA said the bacteria was discovered as a result of random batch testing and no illnesses have been reported. And the last trailer for the series finale of Stranger Things has arrived.
You die, I die. You die, I die.
The conclusion of the retro sci-fi show is almost 10 years in the making, and fans of the show can stream the final episode on New Year's Eve at 8 p.m. Eastern on Netflix. The finale will also be screened at more than 500 theaters nationwide. Finale's going to be like 2 hours, too. All right, now let's take a look at what's trending with our very own ABC News contributor, Mike Muse. Mike, always great to see you. All right, so a lot of folks are talking about college sports eligibility after legendary men's basketball coach John Calipari, who's now at Arkansas, I always forget that, had a lot to say in a post-game press conference. Let's first take a listen.
Real simple. The rules bees the rules. So if you put your name in the draft, I don't care if you're from Russia and you stay in the draft, you can't play college basketball. Well, that's only for American kids. What?
All right, so for those not following, tell us what's going on here with the eligibility rules.
So much is happening with college basketball and eligibility right now. The challenge is that the NCAA has removed so many limits on what a student athlete can earn and what their compensation is, and also to what does eligibility look like. They have come up short in the legal court system with lawsuits that has really impacted how they can view eligibility. In the United States, an American basketball player, once they declare they're going for the draft and they enter and they stay there, that automatically makes them ineligible to continue their collegiate career. But in the European and international students, if they declare the NBA, but they don't actually, declare going into the NBA draft, but they don't actually sign a contract by standards, the U.S. labor law does not see them as actually being a professional athlete, to which then international student can then sue the NCAA for discrimination. And so because of the fact that the NCAA is operating in this gray area of what is a student athlete in 2025 and beyond, are they professionals? Are they amateurs? Are they just students? Are they student athletes? And because that there are no clear rules being defined, they are in this gray zone, and they're trying to do best they can to mitigate legal litigious action because of the gray area.
So these rules are always changing. I mean, I remember a time where you could go right out of high school straight to the pros. And then another coaching legend, Rick Pitino, so he's weighing in saying the game I've been in for over 40 years no longer exists. So what do you think he means by that?
The game that he was in no longer exists because the era of college sports has changed. If you look at D1 football and basketball, let's just look at the media rights and what the particular D1 football compensation is going to be for the college football playoffs. Andrew, I added it up. The conferences are going to make a combined $116 million just in cash prize payouts for those conferences that are in the playoff system. If you look at the media buying rights of D1 college basketball for March Madness, that media rights is over $1.1 billion. We are looking at a professional industry now where players can make compensation with NIL deals that are in the millions, and some could even go up to 100 million because there is no limit on what their compensation is. So we are at a new level of what professional sports seems to be merging into amateur, and amateur is merging into professional sports. Coaches like Pitino can't continue to exist in this traditional model in a way that now we're looking at professional ways and means and standards and economics, right? When you look at those economics, that isn't amateur anymore. It's not no more student athlete, where the emphasis is placed on the student academics. We're talking economics now at this point. And that is the challenge that coaches are facing and what athletic directors across the country are facing, in addition to NCAA officials.
Yeah, the game is just always changing, right? Everybody wants to pay the players, but they're still amateurs. As you mentioned, they're not quite pros just yet, even though there's a lot of money in the NCAA. All right, Mike Muse, thank you. That's our show for this hour. I'm Andrew Dimbert. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks for streaming with us.